The Cooke. A historical fiction of love, identity and fate by S.J. Jeppsson. Chapter 37. A Wedding. The sombre weight of the morning's sorrow gradually yielded to the joy of the afternoon as the clouds parted and the city turned from mourning the loss of one of its finest to celebrating the union of two esteemed families. Inside the grand halls of St. Thomas Church, florists worked swiftly, their arms overflowing with white roses and calla lilies, arranging towering bouquets along the marble altar. Silver candelabras stood poised, their unlit tapers waiting to cast a golden glow over the ceremony. An organist rehearsed quietly, soft chords filtering through the nave like a prayer, while a small ensemble tuned in the loft. Guests were already gathering, silk and satin whispering along polished stone, society's brightest names settling in pews beneath jewel-toned saints. A short distance away, Delmonico's, the most exclusive dining establishment in the city, was undergoing a transformation of its own. Servers polished the last of the crystal glassware, the dining hall aglow with golden chandeliers and the rich sheen of polished mahogany. Long banquet tables were dressed in the finest linens, silver serving trays standing at the ready for a menu curated to impress even the most discerning palates. Everything was set, every detail accounted for, because this was not just a wedding. This was the event of the year, a union of American industry and British aristocracy, a spectacle of prestige, power, and legacy. And at its heart stood a woman who had never belonged to this world at all. The hours between the funeral and the ceremony blurred into a hush of preparation. The ladies had gone directly from Trinity to a townhouse just off Fifth Avenue, where Margaret had arranged a private suite for final dressing and composure. Charles and the Earl had parted earlier, leaving for their club to receive a few distinguished guests, while Thomas awaited his bride at the church alongside his groomsmen. Kate sat at the ornate vanity, the sunlight catching on the golden embroidery of her wedding gown, turning her into a vision of radiance and reverence. The gown was a masterpiece, ivory silk and chantilly lace, designed to flow like liquid moonlight. The sheer sleeves clung to her arms like a second skin, delicate beading catching the light. The golden embroidery shimmered along the bodice, a regal touch against the softness of the silk. The skirt cascaded around her, pooling like a cloud of lace at her feet. Upon her head, a delicate golden tiara, encrusted with diamonds as fine as stars, sat perfectly nestled into her pinned curls, its lace-edged veil drifting over her shoulders like a sheer waterfall. Evelyn stepped back, her expression unreadable, her sharp eyes scanning Kate as though etching this moment into memory.
"You are ready, miss,"
Evelyn announced excitedly.
"Am I?"
Kate asked, her voice trembling. She stood then, her gaze drifting to her image in the floor-length mirror, and her breath caught in her throat. She was Lydia, a bride of extraordinary wealth, a woman of poise and grace, a perfect porcelain doll in an impeccably crafted illusion. And yet, beneath the layers of silk and diamonds, she was still Kate Cooke, the girl who had once kneaded dough with flour-dusted hands, who had dreamed of a future beyond the bakeries of Titchfield, who had never imagined her own wedding would be the most extravagant event of the decade. Evelyn tied the last ribbon at the small of Kate's back and smoothed the silk into place. Her own gown, a pale lilac chosen by the Countess, fell in elegant, dignified lines. Just beyond the door, Miss Rosalind Worth and Miss Arabella Ashcombe waited with their bouquets, the very picture of composure arranged by Margaret and the Countess. Margaret swept in, eyes bright and precise.
"We're leaving for the church in 5 minutes,"
she said softly, though every syllable carried the force of a command. The moment she saw her daughter, her Lydia, standing before the mirror, her eyes filled with unshed tears.
"Oh, my darling,"
she whispered, her voice trembling.
"You look magnificent."
Kate turned to face her, swallowing the tightness in her throat, forcing herself to smile with practiced radiance.
Thank you, Mother.
Kate drew a breath. The veil trembled. Evelyn took her hand, a quick, steadying squeeze that meant more than words. The Countess followed Margaret into the room, her gaze cool and assessing, and, after a moment, approving.
Walk slowly,
she advised, adjusting the fall of the veil with expert fingers.
The aisle belongs to you, my dear.
Then, with a small, deliberate motion, she extended a gloved hand toward Kate.
The ring, if you please,
she murmured. A quiet tradition observed by every Hollingsworth bride before the ceremony. The platinum heirloom, diamond, sapphire, and generations of promise, pressed against Kate's finger beneath the glove. She slipped the material from her hand, revealing the ring, then slid it free, its warmth fading from her skin as she placed it into the Countess's waiting palm. With a nod of approval, Lady Grantham tucked the heirloom into a small velvet-lined case that would remain in her keeping until the vows were spoken. A gleaming black carriage waited outside the townhouse, its doors emblazoned with the Weatherby crest. Sebastian sat tall on the box beside two footmen, all three dressed in finery fit for the occasion, their dark coats catching the faint sheen left by the morning's rain. One of the footmen stepped forward and opened the door as the Countess and Margaret descended the townhouse steps. The second footman assisted them into the carriage with smooth, practiced precision. Kate followed next. Rosalind and Arabella gathered around her, lifting the lace and silk of her gown so that not a single embroidered hem brushed the damp stones. Together they guided her toward the carriage, and when Kate stepped inside, they carefully arranged the billowing layers of her skirts around her, ensuring every fold remained pristine as she settled into the forward-facing seat. They climbed in after her, taking their places at her sides in a soft rustle of pale lilac silk. Evelyn approached last. Gloved, composed, and radiant in her bridesmaid's gown, she placed one foot on the carriage step, only for Sebastian to break into a wide grin and spring down from his post.
Well now,
he drawled, extending his hand toward her.
Had I known I'd be driving angels to the church, I'd have polished the carriage twice.
Evelyn stopped mid-step, one brow rising like a challenge.
Oh, hush you. You'll embarrass yourself.
Embarrass? Ah, not likely.
He tapped his cap with mock gallantry.
I'm just paying a compliment where it's due.
That's twice now,
she countered, eyes narrowing in amusement.
Any more of that, Mr. Christopher, and people will think I enjoy it.
His smile deepened, boyish, proud, and utterly smitten.
And do you not?
Evelyn didn't dignify that with an answer. She took his hand as he guided her, slipping into the carriage with a soft huff, the faint curl tugging at her lips, betraying her. Inside, Rosalind and Arabella exchanged a swift, unmistakably intrigued look. One part curiosity, one part disbelief. Neither would ever dream of entertaining a flirtation with a footman, no matter how handsome, yet the ease between Evelyn and Sebastian was undeniable, and strangely charming. Arabella leaned in ever so slightly, her voice a refined whisper.
Is he always like that?
Worse,
Evelyn replied without hesitation, smoothing her gloves with theatrical primness.
and I've yet to decide whether it's a flaw or a benefit.
Rosalind's lips twitched, struggling not to smile.
A benefit?
She murmured.
My goodness.
Evelyn shrugged, wholly unbothered.
Well, it's not every day that we get to celebrate such an occasion, right? So someone in this carriage ought to enjoy themselves.
She flashed a mischievous grin toward Kate, who arched her brow.
Someone already seems to be enjoying himself.
Kate said, tilting her head ever so slightly toward the driver's seat. The carriage rippled with restrained giggles. Rosalind trying to hide hers behind her glove. Arabella utterly failing to compose herself. The bridesmaids exchanged another look, this one softer, touched with something perilously close to admiration. Evelyn may have been a maid by station, but she carried herself with a confidence neither silk nor surname could teach. As they rode the few short blocks to St. Thomas Church, the ladies settled into their seats, the plush interior of the carriage humming with a quiet, feminine conspiratorial energy. On arrival to the church, Margaret's careful arrangements ensured no delays. Ushers hurried out to guide them through a side entrance, away from the crowd's eager eyes. Evelyn, Rosalind, and Arabella descended first. Together they gathered the lace and silk of Kate's gown, lifting it carefully so that not a single embroidered hem touched the damp stone. The rain had left the pavement slick, and the three of them moved as one. A small protective court around the bride. Kate stepped beneath their hands, her veil drifting like mist, her gown suspended above the ground as though borne by angels. Within the cool vestibule, the murmur of the congregation pulsed, just beyond the great oak doors. Charles waited there, his expression softening as Kate stepped in, gown and veil trailing behind her. He offered his arm without a word, and she took it, her heart thrumming against the steady rhythm of his calm. Inside the vaulted interior, Thomas already stood at the altar, flanked by two of his closest companions from his school days, young men of good family, brought over from England to stand as his groomsmen. Closest to him stood Mr. Alistair Whitney, eldest son of Sir Langford Whitney. His posture was impeccable, shoulders squared with the quiet authority of a man shaped by years in the cavalry. His dark coat was tailored with military precision, its buttons catching the amber glow of the candles. The strong, clean lines of his profile, so unmistakably English, gave the impression that he had stepped straight out of a portrait in his family's ancestral hall. Just beside Whitney stood Mr. Julian Van Allen, heir to a banking house whose influence stretched from London to Boston. Slightly younger, with keen blue eyes and a studied composure, he carried an effortless polish born of old wealth and quiet ambition. His gloved hands rested calmly before him, though a faint, irrepressible spark in his expression betrayed his anticipation for the moment. Their dark coats and polished shoes gleamed beneath the candlelight, each man a portrait of breeding and propriety. Yet, even among such formidable company, it was Thomas who drew every eye. Tall, composed, his profile lit by a shaft of stained glass light, he glanced toward the entrance as the murmur of the congregation shifted. His jaw tightened, then softened, the only indication of nerves his repeated straightening of his cravat, as he waited for the moment when the doors would part and his bride would be revealed. The pews of St. Thomas were filled with New York, Boston, and London's most influential families, their jewel-toned silks and shimmering diamonds glittering in the soft glow of candlelight. Outside the entrance, Kate clutched her bouquet, her fingers trembling ever so slightly around the ivory cascade of roses, calla lilies, lilacs, and wisteria, her hand holding steady to Charles's arm. He leaned in, his voice soft with emotion.
"You look like a princess, my dear,"
he whispered.
"The perfect bride."
The organ swelled into the bridal chorus. Two ushers opened the wide oak double doors to the sanctuary, and the procession began. First came Rosalind Worth and Arabella Ashcombe, bouquets poised, steps measured. Evelyn followed, steady and graceful, the picture of quiet strength. And then, Kate. She entered on Charles Weatherby's arm, the ivory silk of her gown spilling like water over stone, golden embroidery catching the afternoon light. A hush swept the nave as her veil drifted, a sheer waterfall, and her tiara flashed like a crown. Kate forced herself to breathe, and together they stepped forward. At the altar, Thomas Hollingsworth stood tall, composed, confident. But when his gaze met hers, something in his expression shifted. It was softness, genuine reverent admiration. The aisle stretched before her, a golden pathway to a future she had never thought possible. Each step seemed to press the weight of destiny deeper into her very bones. At last, they reached the altar, and Kate gave a timid smile as her eyes met Thomas's. This was it. The moment her entire illusion would become law. The priest lifted his hands, his voice carrying through the hushed stillness of St. Thomas Church.
Dearly beloved,
The priest began, his voice filling the vaulted space.
we are gathered here in the sight of God and in the face of this company to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony. If any man can show just cause why they may not lawfully be joined together, let him now speak, or else hereafter forever hold his peace.
Silence, deep as the sea.
Who therefore gives this woman to be wed?
The priest asked.
Her mother and I do.
Charles responded proudly. Then he turned to his daughter, his Lydia, the world believed, and with hands that did not quite hide their tremor, he cupped her face, pressing a gentle kiss to her cheek, then placed her hand in Thomas's before taking his seat on the front pew beside Margaret. And yet, as Thomas took her gloved hand and helped her onto the altar, something shifted inside her. Because for the first time, this didn't feel like a lie. It felt like a life she had stepped into, a life that was now hers.
Honourable guests,
Began the priest.
we are gathered in this sacred place to witness and to bless the union of the Right Honourable Viscount Lord Thomas Hollingsworth and Miss Lydia Jane Weatherby. Before God, their families, and this company of witnesses, they come to be joined together, a covenant both solemn and joyous, a bond that unites not only two hearts, but two lives, two houses, and two destinies. Marriage is a covenant not of man's invention, but of God's ordaining, a sacred bond that joins two lives into one. Once they were strangers, their paths divided by sea and nation. Thomas of England's ancient soil, and Lydia of America's proud shore. Yet Providence, in its mercy, has drawn them together. As the waters may divide, so too do they unite. The sea which carried them to this meeting has been a vessel not of distance, but of destiny. And so today they stand before us, not as two apart, but as two becoming one. The Scriptures teach, two are better than one, for if they fall, one will lift up the other, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. So may your lives be bound together in strength, upheld by faith, sustained by love. And again we are reminded, many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it. For true love, consecrated before God, endures through every storm, through every trial, as constant as the rising of the sun, as certain as the tide upon the shore. And so today, beneath the gaze of heaven and before this distinguished company, they come to bind themselves in vows eternal, vows that no storm may shake, no tide undo, and no time diminish. A ship is not proven in calm waters alone, but in the storm that tests its timbers and the captain who steadies its course. So may your union be proven not only in days of joy, but in the trials that come, and may each storm only bind you closer still. I say to you, Thomas and Lydia, cherish the gift you have found in one another. Let gentleness guide your days, and faithfulness anchor your nights. May your love be not only a joy in youth, but a refuge in age, and may it stand as a beacon to all who witness it. And now, in the presence of God and these witnesses, we shall bind these two together as one.
The priest's voice rang through St. Thomas Church, steady, measured, each word carrying the weight of forever.
Do you, Lydia Jane, take Thomas Alexander James Nathaniel Pierce to be your lawfully wedded husband?
Kate's lips parted, her heartbeat roaring in her ears. She glanced up at Thomas, whose expression was unwavering, filled with warmth.
I do.
She whispered, and the words felt both real and irrevocable.
And do you, Thomas, Lord Hollingsworth, take Lydia to be your lawfully wedded wife?
Thomas didn't hesitate.
I do.
The air inside St. Thomas Church was thick with candlelight and expectancy. Golden rays filtered through the stained glass windows, casting jewel-toned light across the polished stone floor. At the altar, surrounded by ivory roses and calla lilies, Kate stood in a gown of silk and lace, her gloved hands trembling faintly in Thomas's.
The Viscount and his bride will now take a moment to speak their own prepared words for one another,
the priest said, nodding to Thomas. A beat of stillness. And then Thomas spoke, his voice low and even.
I once thought I understood my path.
He began slowly.
Born into legacy, I knew what was expected of me, and I was taught from a very young age to fulfill my duty. But none of it prepared me for you.
He paused, the weight of the moment resting in the quiet between words.
You have been a mystery, a revelation, and, without question, the most unexpected grace of my life. I vow to be your partner, not just in name or station, but in honesty, respect, and in love. I choose you, my Lydia, exactly as you are.
Kate's breath hitched, her lips parting as she gathered herself. The silence of the sanctuary was magnified as some guests tilted forward slightly to hear her.
I spent my life thinking I would always be someone in the background.
She whispered, her voice soft but steady.
But you saw me. Even when you didn't know me, you looked at me like I mattered. You gave me a place in this world I never thought I would be able to have.
Her throat tightened, but her voice gained strength, the words rising not from the part she played, but from the woman beneath it.
You have shown me such care, such tenderness, such reverence, even more than I could have imagined or hoped for. And now, before God and all these witnesses, I vow to be your wife. Not because you expected it, but because you allowed me to make my own choice. I choose you, Thomas. Every day, in every life, I would choose you.
There was a beat of stillness, as if the church itself held its breath. Finally, the priest nodded and invited the ring to be presented. The heirloom ring, entrusted, as tradition demanded, to the Countess, Lady Grantham, had been carefully guarded throughout the ceremony, a silent steward of 10 generations' promises. And now, as the chapel fell still, the Countess stepped forward and placed the ring into her son's trembling hand. Thomas bowed his head slightly, not just as a son, but as the heir she had raised him to be, and brushed a soft, reverent kiss against her cheek. It was a gesture so fleeting, so dignified, that it felt more like a benediction than an embrace. With the faintest nod, the Countess withdrew, gliding back to her place among the front pews, as though sealing the moment with her silent blessing. Then the priest nodded gently and received the ring from Thomas.
Bless, O Lord, this ring,
he said, his voice steady and solemn,
that she who shall wear it may abide in thy peace, and that it may ever be a sign of the covenant betwixt them, a bond not to be broken by time nor trial.
He closed his hand around the band for a brief moment, as if sealing the prayer into the metal itself, then extended it once more toward Thomas.
Take this ring,
he intoned softly,
and place it upon her hand in token and pledge of your unending love.
Thomas took the heirloom band of platinum, diamond and sapphire and slid it onto her finger, careful, reverent.
With this ring I thee wed.
He said softly.
With my body I thee worship, and with all my worldly goods I thee endow.
The blessing fell over them like light.
Those whom God hath joined together, let no man put asunder.
He looked from bride to groom, a small, certain smile. Then he turned to the assembled guests, his voice lifting with quiet joy.
I have the great honour and sacred privilege,
the priest proclaimed, his words ringing beneath the vaulted ceiling,
to present to this congregation, joined now in covenant and name, Lord and Lady Hollingsworth.
Thomas did not reach for her lips, not here, not now, but he lifted her gloved hand and pressed a kiss to her fingers, lingering just long enough for the whole church to release a single breathless sigh. And then the chapel erupted into applause. The organ burst into Mendelssohn's Wedding March as Thomas and Kate turned to face the gathered throng of excited guests before stepping from the altar as the recessional began. Evelyn's eyes shone as she carried the flowing train of Kate's gown. Rosalind and Arabella recovered their poise and followed. The Weatherbys and the Granthams stood as one, two houses rising in a single motion, while petals waited at the open doors like a scatter of small blessings. And for an instant, the briefest heartbeat between vow and life, Kate felt the shape of her future settle around her like a gown that finally, impossibly, fit. Outside Fifth Avenue brightened. Carriages shifted, the city leaning for a better view, as the newly married couple crossed the threshold into the roar of the world. The dining hall at Delmonico's was alight with a warm golden glow, its walls lined with mirrored sconces that reflected the flickering candlelight of the chandeliers above. A lavish banquet stretched the length of the room, adorned with silver trays of oysters, roasted pheasant, and delicate French pastries. A string quartet played softly, their music weaving effortlessly through the hum of elegant conversation. The most influential families of American and European high society moved through the space with graceful ease, their gowns shimmering in jewel tones, their laughter refined, their words carefully chosen. Margaret Weatherby moved through the glittering reception at Delmonico's like a conductor guiding her orchestra. Every detail had been tuned to perfection, the silver trays gleaming beneath the chandeliers, the violins swelling sweetly, the scent of roses and roasted pheasant mingling in the air. But for Margaret, there was only one performance that mattered. On her arm, the Countess glided with effortless poise, her sapphire silk gown catching the candlelight like the surface of a midnight sea. Diamonds winked at her throat, and the air around her seemed to shift, as though society itself was listening to her every word. Margaret's voice rang bright and clear before a cluster of formidable matrons, Mrs. Cabot, Mrs. Gentry, Charlotte Danbury, and several others whose names carried weight not just in New York, but in the Brahmin halls of Boston society as well.
Ladies,
Margaret announced, her smile wide but controlled.
may I have the honor of introducing the Countess of Grantham, my daughter's new mother by marriage.
A ripple of polite astonishment moved through the group, fans fluttering, eyes widening. Marilyn Cabot's lips curved faintly as she dipped her head, while others gasped, audibly delighted. The Countess inclined her head with practiced grace.
A pleasure,
she said, her English vowels soft as velvet. Then, after a pause, her gaze swept over them with just enough warmth to melt the frost of her composure.
I have long admired the women of New York,
she added smoothly.
and of course Boston, whose refinement is spoken of afar. How lovely to see you again, Mrs. Cabot.
The effect was instant. Fans fluttered faster, cheeks flushed with pleased surprise, and Margaret, standing just a little taller, allowed herself the smallest triumphant smile. For years they had whispered that the Weatherbys were money without pedigree, but tonight, with a single remark from the Countess of Grantham, Margaret had delivered her family into the golden circle of true society, where New York wealth and Boston lineage stood acknowledged in the same breath as English nobility. Mrs. Cabot, resplendent in pale blue silk, nodded with effortless poise, her fingers curling around the stem of her champagne flute.
My dear Margaret,
Mrs. Cabot cooed, pressing her hands warmly.
everything is simply magnificent. But of course, we would expect nothing less from the Weatherbys. And Augusta,
She mused, acknowledging the Countess.
it is delightful to see you again, and on this side of the sea.
She used Augusta's name, an intimacy not permitted by rank and offered now only as a genteel rebuke. Mrs. Cabot had not forgiven that her own daughter had been passed over, and the offence shimmered beneath every syllable. Margaret, ever the poised hostess, smiled demurely.
We are honored to have you here, Marilyn.
Nearby, Cordelia Parkman stood with Mrs. Gentry, their feathered fans fluttering delicately as they assessed the scene with sharp, practiced eyes.
Lydia looks positively radiant, don't you think?
Cordelia noted, her voice laced with admiration, though her lips curled just slightly at the edges.
She does, indeed,
Mrs. Gentry replied smoothly, her sharp gaze flickering toward the bride as she stood at the far end of the hall with Thomas.
And Thomas, well, I dare say he looks rather pleased with his choice.
Cordelia hummed, her fan moving in slow, measured strokes.
A most suitable match, wouldn't you agree?
Mrs. Gentry smiled knowingly.
Quite.
If either woman suspected even the faintest shadow of something amiss, they kept it carefully concealed behind their practiced smiles. Caroline stood nearby, the candlelight catching the faint gold in lace of her gown, a champagne colour that some might suggest was too light to be appropriate for the occasion. Josephine Channing and Annabel Sinclair drifted toward her like two beautifully dressed hawks who had scented opportunity.
Caroline,
Josephine murmured, fan fluttering like a restless bird.
Tell me you've noticed.
Caroline arched a brow.
I notice many things, Josephine. Might you be a tiny bit more specific?
The groomsmen.
Annabel sighed dramatically, angling her chin toward the parquet floor.
Every last one of them handsome and English and,
She lowered her voice.
more importantly, eligible.
Josephine nodded vigorously.
Eligible and apparently determined to ignore us entirely.
Caroline followed their gazes to where Thomas's groomsmen, impeccably dressed young men with the unmistakable bearing of London's old houses, were leading Arabella and Rosalind into a waltz. Annabel's fan snapped shut with a soft click.
They've known those girls since London.
She said, voice tightening with irritation.
And here we stand like unopened invitations.
Josephine exhaled sharply.
Honestly, was an introduction too much to hope for? New York isn't exactly overflowing with titled bachelors. One would think they might make themselves available.
Caroline kept her expression serene, though her eyes glinted with wry amusement.
The English do have their habits,
she said lightly. Josephine made a face.
Yes, they cling to what they know,
she muttered.
Arabella and Rosalind probably had their cards marked long before the ship ever docked.
Annabel let out a frustrated hum.
Well, if Thomas's groomsmen intend to bury themselves in familiar company all evening, then I suppose that leaves only one eligible gentleman actually making an effort.
Her gaze slid toward Horace Davenport, speaking animatedly with Thomas's uncle near the champagne tower. Caroline's jaw tightened just slightly. Josephine smirked.
Oh yes, your mother practically shoved you toward him at the engagement ball.
Don't be ridiculous, she did nothing of the sort,
Caroline replied primly. Annabel laughed.
Oh, my dear, she might as well have tied a satin ribbon around your wrist and marched you across the room.
Caroline fought the urge to sigh.
He's well connected,
she said.
One of his only decent qualities.
Josephine leaned in, voice dropping.
And,
she added meaningfully,
he is one of the few men tonight whose eyes are wandering.
Caroline followed that line of sight and caught Horace looking at her again, assessing, considering, as though she were a puzzle worth solving. A soft flush warmed her cheeks. Annabel lifted her fan and hid a slow smile behind it.
Well,
she murmured,
if the English groomsmen insist upon being loyal to their London roses, perhaps New York shall make do with distant cousins.
Josephine giggled.
And who knows, distant cousins may prove surprisingly advantageous.
Caroline inhaled, keeping her posture flawless, her chin elegantly lifted.
Ladies, I assure you,
she said, her tone smooth as polished glass.
I am perfectly capable of deciding with whom I prefer to dance.
Annabel nodded approvingly.
Of course you are, Caroline.
A beat.
But if I'm not mistaken,
she added slyly, eyes drifting past Caroline's shoulder.
Someone is heading this way.
Caroline stiffened instinctively, then allowed her expression to settle into perfect composure. She did not turn, but she knew. Horace Davenport was crossing the ballroom, and he was coming directly toward her. As champagne glasses clinked and laughter wove effortlessly through the candlelit hall, Horace Davenport approached Caroline Cabot with the air of a man who knew exactly what he wanted.
Miss Cabot.
He greeted smoothly, offering a perfectly measured bow, his gaze warm but assessing.
Might I have the honor of this dance?
Before Caroline could answer, Marilyn Cabot turned, her gloved fingers adjusting the lace cuffs of her gown as she appraised Horace with the sharp eye of a mother who saw an opportunity.
My daughter would be delighted,
Marilyn interjected with effortless grace, her hand gently pressing against Caroline's back.
Wouldn't you, my dear?
Caroline hesitated for only the briefest of moments before inclining her head, her expression perfectly composed, polished, practiced.
Why, yes, of course,
she said smoothly, allowing Horace to take her hand. As they stepped onto the gleaming parquet dance floor, Horace smiled, his grip steady around hers.
A wise decision,
he murmured. Caroline lifted a delicate brow.
Is that so?
Horace's smirk deepened, his steps leading them into the waltz with effortless precision.
I've been told I make an excellent match.
Caroline huffed a soft laugh, but her mother's watchful gaze reminded her precisely why she had accepted this dance. And so she allowed herself to be led into the waltz, while the world around them spun with wealth, whispers, and the faint scent of a deal being struck. Margaret's gaze followed the dancers a moment longer before she turned back to her companions, her voice smooth as satin.
Yes, well, the Countess and I were only just remarking how very fortunate New York is to be able to host such a union. England's oldest houses joining with America's rising ones. It lends society here a richness one rarely finds, even in Boston.
Her smile was demure, almost innocent, as though she had offered nothing more than a compliment. The Countess inclined her head ever so slightly, her expression unreadable save for the faintest curve of approval at the corner of her lips. It was enough. The flicker of fans and the brief tightening at the corners of painted mouths told Margaret that her barbs had landed precisely where she intended. Across the ballroom, for the longest time, Kate and Thomas had nary a moment alone. But at last, as Thomas pulled her onto the dance floor, whispering something soft and sweet against her ear, Kate realized something. This wasn't just a role anymore. This was her life, even if part of her was still quietly trying to wake up. Around her the music swelled, the chandeliers blazed, and the world applauded the groom as he danced with his bride, certain that the choice they had made this night would be forever.